What the hell?
What the hell?
Here we go.
Who is that?
Although hard to believe.
This is a White Panther Party T-shirt that I'm displaying. All of our Jazz Cabbage Cafe viewers and listeners. White Panther Party, Detroit, Ann Arbor, founded 1968. I bought this at the Hippie Fest up here in Flint this last weekend. Super proud of it with my friend Susan.
Nice.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Not as cool as my hat, but that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, yeah, your invisible hat. Okay.
You guys are both nerds.
A little warm to be wearing it right now. Gifted from John Sinclair himself.
That's right.
But it's the same dude. Actually, that same guy's got work out by Lenny. He's got stuff out that commemorates a lot of the history of John Sinclair and the movement and stuff. He's got some cool shit. Sound Detroit, I think it is.
Gary is his name. He's a wonderful gentleman. He has a lot of history. He's been around for a long time, and what a great line of products. And he features a ton of John Sinclair stuff, and we just love it. Welcome to Jazz Cabbage Cafe, everyone. On air with us right now, Debra Young, our host Jamie Lowell, and I am Rick Thompson.
And we'll have a few others join us along the way. But let's check out our awesome sponsors. Maybe we should start a new thing and like read them off as they're going. Do you want to try that?
You can't because it mutes your mic while it plays the video. Watch.
You can't. Can you unmute it yourself?
I think you can. Let's try it.
Well, let's give it a shot. I'll try.
All right, let's just try it.
I'm going to try it. All right. Can anybody hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
There you go.
The Botanical Company, Redemption Cannabis, Real Leaf Solutions from Kalkaska, the Detroit Nutrient Company, and GrowGreenMI.com. Thank you for your sponsorship and your support.
I hope everybody heard that. We'll have to figure that out.
Yes. Rock on Grow Green. I just got an order from Grow Green delivered yesterday.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Grow Green, Redemption, Botanical Company, Real Leaf Solutions, Detroit Nutrient Company.
Yep.
And all great, all awesome, doing great stuff, supporting us, obviously.
Yep.
More to come.
I just completed an article for Skunk Magazine, and one of the subjects was bringing Michigan out of its recession and how the cannabis industry helped out. And not to be undersold is the role that hydroponics and indoor gardening stores played in Michigan's revitalization. Because as we rotated into home cultivation, people had to purchase it. And instead of purchasing it online or from out of state, they had
wait a second.
Sources. Yes.
What?
Okay, we weren't live on one of the feeds for a second, and now we're back on. I don't know what happened, but that's why
especially when adult use first legalized, it was the wintertime. You could not grow outside, so people were anxious to get started, and that's where you go.
Well, I'm talking back in 9, and when people like Bob Redden and yourself and other folks, said, hey, I've got this opportunity. Let me put it to the test. That's really when we started to see, hydroponic stores in every town, all across the state.
So really early on, David Overholt, who people know of from various things within the cannabis world, and he's done a lot of stuff politically. He's actually been a caregiver, and I think he's even in the license world or something like that. But he lives in this little town, this little agricultural town on the west side of the state, where Fred Meyer of Meyer Thrifty Acres was born and raised, and he started a grow shop in an agricultural farm town, and not a pseudo one where they were actually selling cannabis or anything like that, but a garden supply center in an agricultural town, and they actually shut him down. He had to fight that for a while, because his purpose obviously was to help with cannabis growing under the new law.
Yeah. A lot of these places would grow regular houseplants in the window under lights, just as a, show we're not cannabis. Yeah, whatever works.
One of the biggest places in indoor growing that I remember, Northern Lights, which is right in Madison Heights right there. They have some of the biggest tropical plants growing there. It's quite amazing. What a proof statement for your products when you can show these gorgeous, lovely plants growing, and in tents too. They have little grow tents in which they have all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So I remember like going into some head shops too. There'd be sometimes even a sign coming in say, use this terminology. You know, point being in grow shops and in head shops to avoid that you actually want to use it for cannabis or intend it
for
to
tobacco
legally use
use only. The smoke shops always would have disclaimers by the glass display saying for tobacco use only.
Yep, that's one of the reasons why we developed the whole tomatoes code name for cannabis. When you went to an indoor garden store, you had to talk about growing your tomatoes. You couldn't talk about growing cannabis, or they'd escort you out as a result of Operation Green Merchant.
And we ultimately would like to see cannabis treated more like tomatoes, so that works.
Yeah.
So I think, if I'm not mistaken, Adam might be undergoing some surgery either today or tomorrow. He mentioned it on Medical Mondays last night.
Good luck on you, Adam. What's wrong? Something.
All details I don't necessarily know, but
maybe we don't want to know.
He's got some stuff going on, and he keeps on trying to do what he can do to fix it and improve the quality of his life. But
pretty sure. Didn't he mention back surgery?
Yeah, I think that's I think that's kind of it, like the neck, or I think that's it. But I mean, maybe we'll hear from him like after it's all over with and get some details and hope that it's done its job and he's on his way to recovery and improvement. Positive vibes to him. Rory Gold was on there last night talking about his situation with Arborside and how he had to eventually dump his quest for licensing and sell, but that he's got plans to be back in industry and stuff like that. It was a decent show. It was kind of interesting conversation with him. Last week we got a check-in. Speaking of Adam, we got a check-in from the Glass Show in Vegas. We got a twofer because he had Pony Boy there with him, and that was pretty cool. And then we had a conversation with attorney Sean Gallagher, who's come into the cannabis world, and he's currently involved in some legal stuff with Muskegon on behalf of some people we know, and also had a lot of information on some other things and gave his views on what's going on currently in the cannabis world in Michigan. And I thought that was a pretty good conversation. I enjoyed that. People can still watch that anytime. So today, this is pretty cool, actually. We couldn't get him on live, but Director of the Michigan Regulatory Agency, Andrew Brisbo, agreed via Rick to pre-record an interview with us. And so in a little while, we will play that. It's just about a half hour long. And every bit of it, extremely interesting.
Except for the parts where my audio and video cut in and out because I was in the back seat of my car, kind of guerrilla broadcasting,
Sorry.
Well, no, it's my fault. I was at a meeting earlier today, by the way, with some awesome guys at Luxury Loud. I don't know if you can see that. Awesome. Fantastic facility in Detroit. Very historic location where we had the very first cannabis event in Michigan and the medical era.
I was there.
Yeah, I know. It was great. And it's the same location. So it's very historic. But they have a cultivation center on the second floor, a retail store on the first floor, and a cultivation center downstairs.
There you go.
It's quite a good deal. But I tarried too long in my pleasureful endeavors, and I didn't get back to where I needed to be at the time I was supposed to be there. It's on me, nobody else.
Right.
It must
Right.
be
Thompson time.
So, we'll play that. He's talking mainly about the packaging thing. I'm going to disclaimer some things before we get into that. Rick, as he said, wasn't on there as much, so maybe all of the civility that could have been there wasn't retained. So I'll explain a couple things before we play the video.
Can't wait.
There's some good information on there. It's not that big of a deal, really, but there's some good info on there. One thing for sure, nothing should be conflated with criticizing Director Brisbo, because he's in this case he's doing a good job. And
now I want to see the video.
He's carrying out.
Excited. Let's go.
There's nothing major. He's carrying out. What he's supposed to do in his position. I just wanted to offer further perspective with something that's very difficult, you know, and we make a lot of assumptions about cannabis. There's a lot of misinformation floating around, even for those who are immersed in it. It's difficult enough, and I just wanted to point some stuff out. And I probably, you know, went a little bit too into it, but he handles stuff really well, and it's not, and it's me, not him, that type of stuff. So that's the disclaimer. We'll go into it in a few minutes anyway, and that's what we'll know.
Let's frame the conversation though. Just this week, it's kind of newsworthy. The Marijuana Regulatory Agency released updated guidance. It's not new rules, but it's just a new notification of existing rules in regards to packaging and labeling and merchandising of cannabis products in Michigan. They said a couple of products are not allowed, like nerd ropes. They said other products have to be not contained in child-friendly containers, and then they proceeded to show some examples of not of very child-friendly containers you can use in the cannabis industry. So we wanted the director on to sort of clarify what was the reasoning behind it, what was the position the MRA was taking, and what actions within the regulated industry required their attention like this. And I think he answered those questions. He really did.
He did.
This is stuff where I saw pictures where they said you could not use the words peanut butter or Rice Krispies, that it would be attracting children. That seems a little ridiculous, Rick.
Well, I'm not saying that all their rules are.
Yeah, I mean, that just seems a little ridiculous. If it's a peanut butter edible, why can't you write peanut butter on the packaging? I mean, you need to know what's in it.
I'm not defending the rules. You know this.
Well, he explains that, where the lines are and what's going to be effective and how much we should really be caring about this based on what the possible consequences are.
That was the exact example.
I mean, those things are all in there. He gets into that. I mean,
yeah, because they had pictures of the peanut butter. They said you have to cover it up with a sticker that says cannabis because it can't say peanut butter because a child might think, oh, it's peanut butter. Well, it is peanut butter, but you know what I'm saying?
Well, but you follow their logic, though, right? If
I do follow their logic, but I mean, peanut butter is a pretty, staples thing that's in everybody's household. I mean, how is that a banned item that would, I don't understand.
Well,
what should it say? Dog shit? This is a dog shit edible, so the kid won't touch it?
Well, I don't think that would be very marketable.
No, I would. You have to at least identify the flavor of it.
Well, I'm not sure exactly what the rules are, and that's one of the things that we talked to the director about. Some of the rules are really clear, and some of the rules are really subjective.
It's weird.
So,
but this is something that he's supposed to carry out, and he mentioned some things like there have been some shaping of the policy over time, but there's also been some new people who have come on and haven't researched historically where the current status was on some of these standards, that they use and stuff. So part of the new rules is also kind of reiterating
alcohol with children's themes. I mean, with flavoring and things like that. And
but you can't equate those two, Deb. You know that.
I know, but I'm just saying the whole thing is just so hypocritical.
Yeah.
And one thing I meant to say but forgot because the way my brain works during the conversation was about how sometimes pain relievers and stuff like that, FDA approved drugs are put into candies and stuff.
Sure.
I didn't I meant to say it and I spaced on it, but. Man, there's a lot there. When we hear it, we can talk about it more. Attorney Paul Tylenda is going to join us at some point.
There's all kinds of candy-flavored vodkas, I mean.
Yeah. And tobaccos and
tobaccos for sure.
We'll get there. I think it was said, this is all part of the transition into the new world with cannabis, getting used to it, understanding its nature better, start off more restrictive. Here's Brandy's explanation here.
Peanut butter is a regular food. The label could be misunderstood to be a peanut butter food and not recognized as a marijuana food. That's really pretty common. So that's kind of at the core of what we were already arguing about. So
right, she's clarifying,
Right. Yeah, that's a statement.
So all right, so we'll get to that in a second. I won't spend as much time disclaimering, but Attorney Paul Tylenda will come on, watch it with us, and then be part of the conversation. He's pretty aware of this issue and has a broad view, and we enjoy talking to him. Plus, he's been doing a lot of great work for the Great Lakes Expungement Network, and give him some credit there. So while we're kind of waiting for these guys to come on, and before we get to that, we have brought up and discussed the Schumer's legalization bill along, I think, with maybe Cory Booker and others, and that's been put out for view. And some of the questions that we had are now kind of come a little bit more to light. And this is going to be the show or conversation about getting really deep into that. But one of the concerns that we had seems to have materialized in it, and what that ultimately means during a long process of even trying to give this a chance within the time frame that's available is up for debate. But the tax situation is not very favorable. In the MORE Act that passed at the end of last session had a 5% tax, and that was a concern. But as we discussed it, a lot of people said you should have heard some of the other numbers that were being discussed and how this is really being looked at. We hear about in Michigan how some people, even the governor, might be interested in trying to raise the excise tax on cannabis to create more funding for different things.
And it would all be together. I mean, the state tax, federal tax, all piled on together, which really prices everybody out of the market.
Right. And of course, one of the reasons in Michigan why we kept it lower was because of what we learned from other states when they really tried to kind of cash in on it and created a situation where it wasn't competitive at all to all the other cannabis activity that was going on, and that's good. So anyway, that is kind of disappointing about that side of it. But 5%, still find that to be a problem. But I guess now, in view of what I'm reading in this bill, maybe that should be something that we hope for.
Yeah, because on its own it would be fine. On its own it would be fine, but roll into the Michigan stuff, and that's ridiculous. People are already struggling to buy medicine here.
Don Onweller mentions a combination of cannabis and alcohol products. That's been something the industry's wanted for a long time, but there was a very big push a few years ago to make sure that combination wasn't present. I think now that the community or the citizenry is more accepting of cannabis and its effects, maybe we can make another push at that. I myself I'm not a fan.
I'm not interested. Yeah, I'm not interested.
Not really. But there are people that would be.
Yeah, whatever. I'm sure there's lots of people who would be. Just not me.
There's a couple questions about Andrew Brisbo too here. Obviously, he is the best person to answer, questions about his perspective on things. But he says, does he support the MCMA? Again, from his perspective, the MCMA is an industry, association.
He doesn't approve or support any
of it. They have input, as does MICIA and other, groups and organizations with a stake. Last session, he brought in us, meaning Rick and a group of other people, under the umbrella of activists to have input on some amendments and things that they were looking at. And we talked about that on the show toward the end of last session. So they just take input, really. I mean, he can answer whether or not there's anything more to it than that.
Well, I noticed Narwhal also asks if he supports the caregiver system.
Right.
In fact, he administers the caregiver system. He has stated publicly on 420 Post and other places that they are not advocating for any change to the caregiver system. He's not asking for it. He's not asking the legislature to do it. So you can define support how you want to. But to me, he's a hashtag no changes guy, sort of.
Okay.
So, and then I think that we bring this up in the video.
Using.
I guess who's a caregiver for life?
Care liver.
Maybe cares for people who have issues.
Some people might need their liver cared for, I'm sure.
But there you go. And that's good. And the caregiver system shouldn't go away. It should always be available. It's very useful. Whether or not the numbers go up or down, depending on need from people, is okay. And none of that should matter. When people talk about all of the stuff that happens that's more than what it's supposed to be, and all that kind of stuff, that's a different conversation. There's already limitations that exist. Some of the ideas that you need to go in and change the laws to make it more difficult for existing caregiver activity doesn't make any sense to address other stuff. And so that's one of the reasons why we certainly oppose, some of the MCMA stuff, and will continue to, and other huge investors who believe, and they're kind of blatant about it, that any activity outside of what they do is a competition, and they would like for it not to go on, and they think that by hurting it, it'll entice more people to have to come into their stores. So obviously that's not true. And Deb's walked away, and Rick has just maybe lost connection for a second, or might come back in. Here's Deb. It's just us.
Sorry.
And
briefly check the dog.
It's all right.
That's right.
Anyway, I forgot what I was talking about, because I was abandoned, and
we left Jamie all alone.
Yeah.
He freaked out. You left. You popped off the screen, and I walked away.
Well, I'm trying to defeat this lag.
But
sometimes we all feel.
Lag. You look like a. Yeah, no, it's like the Godzilla movie.
Oh no! Very terrible.
And of course,
sorry,
Japan. Wall up is going to grow his own, so it's paid tax, and that's good. That's like, it's not legalization unless that option exists.
I agree. Yeah, homegrown is vital.
Many people do a combination, and some people just want to stick with what they or somebody they know grew. It's all good.
Yeah, it's the only way
room for all of it.
Yeah. There's definitely room for all of it, as we can see. If you operate properly, if you're not operating your commercial or your retail business properly, and you're suffering financially, I don't know what to say. Maybe you didn't have a good business model.
There's a lot of people that thought that getting into the cannabis industry was going to be an easy pathway to
quick money,
generational wealth.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, quick money, but you have to recoup your startup prices or your startup costs, and your startup costs are substantial. So those who understood that are probably doing fine, and those who didn't are not. We lost Rick again.
Yeah,
I'm sort of here. I'm like
that happened during the.
I like this better.
During the interview, although Rick was in
was
like in a parking lot someplace without a good connection, so that's why he wasn't on the Director Brisbo interview that much.
Was that why he's not on now? Are you
but
on
now?
again?
He's still working it out at his regular broadcast
gas
spot.
Station parking lot.
Some days just aren't good,
Yeah, I know.
Anyway, I'm hoping that we can get Paul on here soon, because I really wanted to view this with us, and then we can talk about it. He's pretty hip to most of the information. And
what time's he coming on?
I was hoping he's already beyond, so I'm kind of trying to give him a couple more minutes.
Yeah, attorneys, they get sidetracked.
We stretch it out another couple minutes. We'll play the interview anyway, and we'll get feedback from everybody. I tried to impart that, yes, of course we should have these standards in place. Of course they should be clarified. But that we don't need to be too sensational or too concerned about the consequences if a kid does happen to come across an edible. I mean, we don't want that to happen. That's not what we want. But let's not believe that it's this, huge fucking deal, as if it were like alcohol or opiates or something like that.
But I mean, it is kind of, and as a parent, it's your responsibility to make sure that you have non-adult things in the spot where your children cannot access them. I mean, that is on you. Of course, there's a certain amount of safety standards the industry has to, but in the end, it's a parental thing. And, really, I used to have friends whose parents had their liquor cabinets locked up when I was a teenager. They actually had locks on, because that was a big thing. You had the big stereo cabinet and a liquor cabinet in people's houses and stuff. But, it's on you. You're not going to just leave it on the counter without a wrapping on it and not expect your kid to eat a peanut butter cup.
No, but reality is it's going to happen. And to take some kind of effort or make some kind of educational attempt to, preemptively stop kids from having to get it and deal with whatever may come with it is a good idea, probably. I agree with that. Plus, they're directed to do that. He's just doing his job.
Yeah, I get it. Like I say, you got to lock a gun up if there are kids in the house. You're supposed to. You're not going to leave your opiates out. It's just common sense. And
liquor cabinet. Yeah.
Liquor cabinet, you know, yeah. I'm not handing my kid a lighter and say, go play with this lighter somewhere. But that doesn't mean I can't own a lighter.
So Paul's going to come on soon, and we have been joined by John Schlicker. And
Is that John the Green Ball? What is that?
it is, yeah. I think he like got on and then just sifted off, but he left us with a really cool view here. We can wait till he kind of comes back around.
It's a green. For those who don't have any. It's a green fuzzy ball.
And then he'll watch with us too and get his thoughts on it. But then we'll get a. Here's Adam. Surgery's actually tomorrow. He accepts the positive vibes.
Good luck, Adam. Are you in the hospital? Is he in the hospital? Or
And
in the morning?
he's agreeing with me that we don't really need to view medibles as being dangerous. I mean, okay, yes, there needs to be this rule in place and how we do this and where are the parameters and the standards. And we don't want kids to, have access to this if the adults don't want them to or whatever. All that stuff we can agree with. But let's not get too weird about what the consequences if the kid happens to get it,
Yeah, make it impossible for an adult to actually access.
So Rick's resetting, and so we're going to hear from Paul in a minute. Let's give this a couple more minutes. If they're not on, we'll start the thing anyway, and I'm sure they'll come on with enough time to catch most of it, and then we can kind of stay on schedule that way and not bore too many people with banter. Although we do have this guy. I believe he's there now. Are you there, John?
Yeah, there he is.
Hey.
All right.
How's it going?
Hey, good, man. I don't know if you've been able to catch it, but we're basically gonna go into an interview with Director Brisbo, mainly about the packaging and the new bulletin that's come out. Yeah. And but of course we want to talk about that for a little bit. We're going to be joined by Andrew says hi, John. We're going to be joined by attorney Paul Tylenda. And we're going to talk about that for a little bit. And then we'll get an update from you on Cannapalooza this year and what's going on with that. Of course, we had Sean Gallagher on, and he let us know to what extent that he could, if there's been any developments or anything like that.
Right.
It would be good to know. And what are the dates on that?
I appreciate you guys very much.
What are the dates on that, John?
I say I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, what are the dates again on Cannapalooza?
August 20th to the 22nd.
That's right.
Friday we open the gate at noon through Sunday at 6 p.m. Each evening we'll close gate at 10 o'clock.
But the festivities will continue because people will be
there. The festivities will continue throughout.
Right.
All night long. All night long. The fun guy be present.
Yeah, just make sure you get there before 10 and then you can stay all night.
That's right.
I know.
$40 a day, $40 a day, or we got weekend passes for $75. We've also got camping for $25 a campsite. We've got a real good lineup of bands.
Who's going to be there?
Yeah, list off the bands while we're just.
All right, one moment. Let me.
Okay. Hey, it's hard for me to relate to that with my awesome memory, but I guess we'll give John the benefit of the doubt here and let him get his list.
He snapped back quickly. Look
at that. Here we are. Cannapalooza Worldwide this year. We've got Stoker, the Rupel Brothers, Quale, Les Older, the Lone Tree Tour, and we also have Les Older and the Ganja Gang.
Of course.
Wow.
We've got Havana Gold, Gypsy Feet, Nicholas James Tamasama, and he's got some really good music. I've not seen him live, but he's new to our stage this year, and I think people are really going to get into his music.
Oh, it's quite a lineup.
And then we got Kerry West Bay in the Wayward one. Also, we've got just spoken with you. And David Clay Ladd and the Time Travelers group will take care of acoustical jams around the bonfire, which will fire up probably around right about dark. We'll start the bonfire each night, and of course the stage will still be going, and then probably midnight or around there, the bonfire acoustical jams.
Nice. And so I'm thinking about it, and I'll talk about this later too, and maybe put some information up here for people. August 7th, this Saturday, there's a celebration for Marvin, and it's going to be pretty cool. And there's also a lot of great music and great people hanging out, and some things that he wanted covered and wanted done, and that's coming up Saturday. And I told everybody involved in that I would definitely mention it here, but I'll toward the end of the show I'll put some more information up about it though, because it is going to be cool. And
right on.
And people to celebrate Marvin's life, who was a big part of activism, as controversial as he was. It's pretty cool. So.
It's going to be over where the Peace Fest was, right?
I believe
Ralston?
so, yeah.
Yeah, Ralston. Yeah.
Where we saw the raid take place.
Yeah, the military raid. Yeah. But don't let that scare anybody off, because it was really kind of just a side thing. It didn't bother anybody except for the people.
And it turned out to be about some guy who tried to shoot somebody or something like that.
Yeah, and the show went on. Yeah. We were pretty much undisturbed. Yeah, it was a nice vibe. Real nice vibe out there that day.
There's Rick. Oh, we still don't have video, so I have quite the connection.
Wow, still don't have video. Deborah likes it this way, though.
Yeah, so you look like a cue ball. It's just like a round cue ball.
Man,
yep, presentable. Like a cue ball. You're right.
That's that's sexual, I think. I don't know.
How would that be? Come on.
I'm kind of giving a minute here, hoping that Paul can come on. He's wrapping up a conference call right now before he can come on. But it's just about time to start, so I still want to stretch it out just for a minute, so he can kind of be able to discuss some of the content with us. But he does understand this very well, and if we just get this started anyway, I guess
he'll be able to jump in.
Yeah. Rick, what do you think about that?
Give Paul another minute or two.
Right.
I mean, here's the thing. What we wanted to do is to get Paul's observations, not only about the memo, but about the conversation that we had. So he does need to see that if we can. And Paul is our only other guest for today, correct?
Yep.
All right. So John and Paul, we got a bunch of.
It's like the apostles, right?
So I was thinking.
Obviously, Jesus.
Well, I'm all about that.
The can of gods are great. The can of gods are great.
Can of gods. Can apostles.
The can apostles. There you go. That I'd be about.
All right.
Yeah, we got a pretty good list of some speakers to speak in between bands at our event too. Amy Carter's going to come and talk, and we'll talk about Jaden's Law being proposed. We've got Michael Whitty's going to come. I think Chuck Ream is on board. I got to confirm that yet, but
Rick, he went onto his phone. He gave up.
I didn't hear Rick and Jamie in there.
Well, I got Rick and Jamie for sure. I'm counting on Rick bringing cannabis.
Sound like it. Sounds like we were excluded vigorously.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you just didn't give me time, Jamie.
Yeah, you cut him off when he was still halfway through the program there. He didn't
That's
even get
right.
to like the prime spots
That's
yet.
right. You got to remember that this brain focuses and can only handle one thing at a time. I'm trying to roll a doobie right now as well. So.
Oh wow, you're doing terrific. You're talking and rolling.
Yeah, I'm talking and rolling and trying to remember a lineup.
And taking some shit for me.
Taking Jamie
sideways.
Yeah.
I was trying to get it to fix, like John's phone is, but it can't.
Your phone won't do that?
Is it doing it?
No, if you go to the main screen, you've got it locked. That's why, and unlock it, it'll turn.
There's Rick. Hey, Rick. Love you, brother.
Well, I love you too, John. So, yeah, Jamie, I mean, at this point, if we haven't heard much from Paul, if you want to run that thing.
You know what? I think that we bitched enough. Oh, no. I thought Paul was on. He'll come on. He says he's
As soon as he
finishing
quits,
up a
you come
call.
on.
So let's get it going, and then he'll come on, and we'll have him.
Sure.
If not, he can still just join in on the discussion. It's time. How about it's time? And understand, Rick didn't have a great connection throughout all this, so I stayed around to screw it up.
It's a
But there's really good
disclaimer.
information
A
on
double disclaimer. I'm really anxious to see it now.
No, it's not that big of a deal, but good information nonetheless because of Mr. Brisbo.
All right, let's do it.
Attorney Paul Tylenda joins us in the nick
perfect.
of time.
It was like
Hi.
lighting a cigarette in the restaurant. There you
So
go.
we're about ready to play the interview and then come back to a discussion with our panel and get some input from people listening and then talk about what he had to say.
Wonderful.
Here we go. Okay, so today we are going to conduct our first pre-recorded interview on StreamYard, and we have the pleasure of doing that with Director Brisbo, the director of the Marijuana Regulatory Agency. Thanks for joining us here today.
Of course, Jamie. Always willing to appear and discuss the ins and outs of the regulatory program here in the great marijuana space.
Yeah, and obviously I know Rick will kind of join us. He's in a not the world's best connection area right now, but we'll just get kind of started. The most recent thing that you've done, or that is coming out that there's been notice about, is really descriptive packaging parameters and what you can do and what you can't do. So that was dictated. There were some rules out at some point about that, but now it seems like there's a very concerted effort to be extremely clear, to get, a lot of the information in and everybody on the same page. What basically are we looking at as far as that goes, and what was the basis behind really doing that so in-depthly?
So preventing youth access and accidental ingestion has always been, one of the key tenets of the legislation that we administer at the MRA, and it's been addressed in the rules. As we started to see things in the field, as our field staff got back out into the world, post-pandemic, if you will, started to see some things that we wanted to make sure there was consistency in how we were applying the standards and offering clarity on how we were interpreting statutory provisions and rules. And that's been a key focus of ours through advisory bulletins all along, that there are obviously ways to interpret things differently. So we want to make sure, as we are applying the standards that we set via our administrative rules, particularly, that there's clarity on how we're interpreting those things. So we're looking specifically at packages particularly for infused edible products. Those things that once out of the package might be easily confused with something that's not typically containing marijuana. Things like cookies, brownies, things that look like candies, gummies, those sort of things. We make sure that we have some restrictions on the products themselves. But if the packages look like something that is commercially available as a candy product, that's something that's concerning. Young people, if they notice words that are typically associated with candy products like gummy or something like that, we need some descriptor to make sure it's clear that it's a marijuana product, not a candy gummy. And where we have pictures on the packages, particularly concerned about younger people who may not be able to read the packaging, that it doesn't look like it's something that it's not. The real focus is that these are marijuana products. We want the businesses to be able to display their products in a way they're comfortable with, but making sure that they're not mistaken for other types of products.
No, right. And that's, and then of course is, a directive in the law, and it's one of your jobs to help get those rules and define them. And everything you describe seems to be a good way to responsibly, preemptively try to keep interest from kids into some of these products and taking them. And that part is understood. I think some of the concern from like an activist like myself or something is some of the discussion that goes around it. Yes, it's agreed that until somebody's an adult, unless they need it, medically or something like that, that we generally do what we can to keep it away. And there's some responsibility on the parents' part to keep those things separate from all else, so that confusion has a much harder chance of coming by the child. But when the child actually does get a hold of it and use it, some of the discussion gets into, it's poisoning now, and it's described as something as maybe more sensational and dangerous than it actually is. And so while it's agreed, yes, we should be doing these things, some of the stuff surrounding it seems to be kind of an overreach as far as like describing what the possible consequences might be.
I do think it's important, though, to give parents particularly the tools and the best pathway if their child does accidentally ingest the product. We rely on our public health partners and echo that messaging. The statute specifically requires that all products have the Poison Control Center information on it. So I don't know that we're trying to be alarmist in that regard so much as make sure that if a parent's in a situation where their child does consume the product, that they're reminded that best course of action is, get in contact with medical professionals, and they can give you guidance for your situation on what the best course of action might be.
Right. And I think that's a directive you have, and you very, have that intent and innocently, but I don't want to beleaguer this too much because we got some other stuff to talk about it, but just saying the best course of action is getting in touch with the medical professionals because a child's known to have consumed some cannabis is of itself a little sensational for those kind of maybe more understand the nature of the plant, and the fact that there isn't really an issue to point to in which there was a serious consequence as a result of, something like that happening.
Well, I think the key we want to focus on is avoiding those serious consequences. Ultimately, our goal is protecting health, safety, and welfare, both of intentional or potentially unintentional consumers. And I think that's a shared goal between, the governmental agencies and health professionals and industry operators and activists as well, right? I mean, right. No one wants to see anybody get sick or get hurt or have a bad experience. We go a long way to make sure that people are engaging in best practices and aware of best responses if something happens that's unintended.
Yeah, I totally get it. I totally understand. I kind of think that this is part of the transition and part of what time is going to take for a better understanding of cannabis and which things we should really be concerned about and why, and which things that we shouldn't be. And it's all part of that bigger picture from my perspective. So I not in any way criticizing the work. I understand exactly why you're doing it. And, and appreciate making it this clear. I think Rick might have finally rejoined us, and I can move on to him for a little bit more of this discussion.
I like to think I never left, but, sometimes. Director, contained within the bulletin that was released this week, there's a description of nerd ropes, and there's also an image of a Rice Krispie treat. The Rice Krispie treat seems to be labeled as an acceptable cannabis product, but the nerd rope seems to be labeled as not acceptable. How are we defining which of these items are appealing to children and which of these items are not?
I think some of those are one-off decisions to be made, and in some cases we're looking at the product itself, and in other cases the packaging and whether it would be, easily confused. The types of products we have been fairly liberal in terms of what types of products can be available. The key in the bulletin was, you can't tell by a picture if a product is marijuana infused if it looks like any other product. So I remember discussions, we were first implementing the medical program, where I heard from a lot of people saying, why does medicine need to be delivered in a cookie or a brownie? Medicine is if you think about it, if you Google images of what medicine is, you're picturing pills and capsules. But we wanted to be allowing for access to the regulated market to mirror what consumers would be used to in the unregulated market, so that they would ultimately make the choice to utilize the regulated market. We have testing standards and it can ensure safety protocols are adhered to. So what we're really looking at is not putting anything on the packaging that might be confusing to someone who doesn't look at the label and think that it's something else. And so we're looking at pictures of food products. We're looking at labels that are descriptive to include the fact that it's cannabis or marijuana infused or THC infused. We give some options there. And then also looking holistically at a package to say, does this look too much like a commercially available product? So no matter what it says, it's going to look, like a Reese's peanut butter cup, I think was one of the examples that, the color scheme and the layout makes it look exactly like those products. So trying to clarify that these are things that we're going to be telling folks in the field. And I think a lot of what we've done with enforcement, we write the rules, and then you get out and you start visiting facilities through our field operations. You start to see things in practice. It really helps inform our perspective. And this is sort of an offshoot of something our enforcement division's already been doing with putting out our common issues bulletin. So there's an opportunity, if we're seeing things at facilities, to make all operators aware, just like, hey, here's some things we're seeing. It'd be good to course correct before we see it in your store.
Is there a way where there's I'm sorry, is there a list of items that are prohibited items, or is this really kind of a subjective, you have to try it first and then get rejected before we know whether it's going to be positive or not?
There's not a list. I think it'd be very hard to put together a specific list of things, short of having some of those descriptive terms that are in the rules. And this is helping to interpret or to convey how we're interpreting those provisions. But if a licensee is wondering if a certain product would meet the standards or not, they can reach out to our enforcement division. We can take a look at it. We did not want to move in a direction, at least not yet, that some states have done, where they require pre-approval of every product and are, producing in some cases product catalogs that are housed at the state level. We want to be open to letting the free market do what it does, allow businesses flexibility to adapt to an ever-changing market, but we need to make sure that there's clarity in where we set those boundaries.
And if something is considered to be, outside of the parameters, is the ways to resolve that being created so that it doesn't have to, create a lot more cost or hassle or time consideration?
Yeah, and that was certainly a consideration. One of the things that we put in the rules back last June was if we made any shifts, that there'd be a notice period and opportunity, to correct any issues that arose. We looked at that with testing standards as well. It's not as though labs can just tomorrow start testing for an analyte that we told them about today. So in this way, we were aware that businesses would have packaging that would be pre-ordered or on hand for products. They would purchase that stuff in bulk and it would be ready to go. And there'd be a potential cost to the business if we said, you have to throw all of this stuff away. So we did a couple of things there. We're going to use the next several months as an opportunity to educate businesses, analyze the issues that they have, look at specific products and make determinations. But we also wanted to provide a way in which there could be a quick and easy way to deal with any issues through, the placement of like transparent tape over any offending images or verbiage, even outside of that couple-month period, so that they could continue to use the packaging without having to destroy product or repackage everything from the beginning.
For the retailers to send back to the manufacturers, including the nerd ropes. The concept there is that this package or the product is just too appealing to minors, regardless of whether it's in the package or not, and it has to be removed from the market. Is that accurate?
Yeah, there are. You broke up a little bit there, Rick, but I think I got the sentiment of it. There are some products or some packages that there's not a way to modify to meet the standards. There are some that we've dealt with months or years ago where we said this is a product that can't be on the market, and either they brought it back or a new business started producing it and did so out of ignorance of existing interpretations by the agency. But yeah, there are some things that just need to be out of the sake of being inherently appealing to minors that just shouldn't be there.
So that sounds like another reason for doing this. As you said, there have been bulletins out, there's been some decisions made, but there are some newcomers that haven't researched the history necessarily, and have gone about recreating questions about those parameters. So now this is helpful for making things very clear for people.
And I also think in the past year where we've had limited in-person contact with businesses, that provided an opportunity for some of the boundaries to be pushed a little bit, or where our field staff wasn't present, so that businesses could ask them questions quite as frequently as we normally would like to be. So I think there are always going to be issues that arise where we can key in on areas where we want to ensure compliance as best as possible, be clear about how we're interpreting and applying standards so that we can avoid disciplinary action and ultimately, avoid any issues of public health and safety.
Right.
The Marijuana Regulatory Agency doesn't normally receive complaints related to injury. The state health department has very reluctant to release any data or any figures about injury.
You're breaking up, Rick. Can't really make out what you're asking. Unfortunately, I heard you saying
it's on you, Jamie.
Well, yeah, I heard him saying. I believe that do these issues arise by way of complaints?
Well,
Occasionally they do.
Do we have any number? Any? Do we have any number about number of persons injured with cannabis products each year?
Is there an actual database that shows that how people were hurt somehow by a relationship of the packaging?
So we do require reporting of adverse reactions that are reported to licensees, but that's a very small part. We don't specifically publish data on that, and we also don't break down complaints or disciplinary action. You can read the disciplinary action orders on our website, but we don't report on them based on specific violations. In many cases, those orders will encompass multiple violations. We did look at some of the data that had been pretty widely reported on increases in calls to poison control centers in states that have marijuana legalization. Looking at some of that public health data just as an indicator of the need to ensure that there was clarity in the standards that we already have.
Right. Again, though, calls to the poison center does not mean that the child is in actual real danger just because there was some cannabis ingested. There was somebody concerned, of course, and so they made the call, but not to infer that there was a necessary, real huge medical concern with the child. And it kind of seems like that when we talk about the calls to the poison center. And that part is missing.
I'll leave the inferrals to those who are looking at the data, but the hope would be that we can reduce accidental ingestion across the board, and make sure that it's clear what is and what is not a marijuana product.
Right. I understand. I guess I'm trying to temper the point of doing that in the first place. We don't want kids who can't make the decision for themselves properly to not get involved in this, and that is definitely, I think, agreed upon everybody. What the consequences are if it happens to happen, though, is just something I'm trying to point out that seems it gets a little bit more sensationalized than it needs to be at times during the discussion.
If you want to publish your public health research in this space, Jamie, I'll be happy to take a look at it.
It's not my research. It's more like a lack of there being reason to believe that it does. It's not accepting the claim that it hurts them. It's not making the claim that it doesn't. So I'm just trying to temper the discussion. That's all. And I'm sorry, Rick's trying to say something again, but of course his connection is failing. Well, anyway, look, I don't want to, hopefully not create any tension over when I keep saying this stuff. It's not you, and it's not uncommon necessarily. This is getting to understand the nature of cannabis and which things there really is some kind of substantiation to be concerned about over, and which things there are not. it's a difficult thing, and there's a lot of complexities thrown into it by people trying to effectuate messages, even through things that are, supposedly studies and things like that. And there's an image created of a danger, and I'm just trying to say, from somebody who really examines this stuff and lives it, I'm not seeing where the substantiation is for some of these concerns. And it's not that we shouldn't, again, take measures to keep it away from kids. We just shouldn't overblow what the possible consequences are, or have better reasoning for believing that there's going to be some kind of serious danger attached. That's all. I mean, I don't want to make a bigger issue out of it than it needs to be, other than just trying to kind of move the progression of how we view it forward a little bit, or at least try to a little bit.
Right. And I think from my perspective, we don't want to try and convey that we are the experts on the biology of consumers, or we're not even a public health agency, right? We write regulations that are meant to define the parameters of activity by licensees. To all your points, Jamie, when we look at, okay, now if there is unintended ingestion, what should we do? We'll just keep pointing to what the law speaks to, and if there are changes to that, then we'll point to whatever it says next. And that those policy discussions that would happen at the legislative level can be evaluated in terms of what is the best course of action. And I do think that, and maybe this is something we can agree upon, that research in terms of the impacts of cannabis from a scientific perspective, for medicinal or for other uses, is something that should be examined more closely. The agency supports research in this space, and we have some funding that we're calling the Veterans Marijuana Research Grants that are coming to a conclusion soon, where we can play a direct role in supporting advances in science and the use of cannabis for beneficial medical purposes. And I think all of those types of efforts also have tangential impacts where they might, that's the great thing about science, is you go in exploring one hypothesis and you find other information that could be of value. So I think advancing the science is important. So that way the discussion about what is the best messaging, what are the potential harms, is less about is less subjective and can rely more on some objective information.
And so, two things. I'm not trying to imply at all that you're doing anything wrong. You're doing a great job, and you're carrying out exactly what you're supposed to do within the role that you're in. And so that is not my implication at all. It's more about how we view cannabis and to how concerned we should be over, certain behaviors or activity and things like that. That's my only, tempering people to have better reason for assuming that there's going to be some danger here if a kid eats an edible or something like that than what currently exists. That is my only message there. But you're doing a really good job. And the other thing is, there's been a couple times recently. I just want to, if you have anything to wrap up on this issue, please get it in there, because I kind of want to move just to a couple things before we wrap up.
No, right away.
Okay. There's been a couple times been able to cross paths with you in the real world in recent history. One was up at a conference, the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association, and during your presentation there, you mentioned a couple things. One was that there's no at least as far as you're concerned, there's no reason to change caregiver status, by amendment, or you're not looking to do that right now. And you're also looking to try to find ways for businesses to operate more efficiently, maybe less costly, and, work on some concerns that might be there about that, through those means. I picked up on that, and I just really appreciated it. I didn't get a chance to emphasize that, but I wanted to let others know that was part of your discussion. Yeah, and that's something we try to convey to people who are concerned about, Yeah,
I think when we look at policy issues at the agency level, there are some things I'm focused now. We got the Delta legislation through redefining marijuana, what it is or isn't, and making sure all those definitions align across the statutes. I think is an important thing policy-wise and from an administrative perspective. Looking at some other key policy issues still this legislative session, but I think it's always something the agency is focused on. We look for internal efficiencies, and we also look at the regulations that businesses have to comply with, and focus in on areas where we can remove anything or alter anything that might be a hindrance to a business's operation if there's not any specific, public health, safety, and welfare benefit to it. So that's something, one great thing about being in this job is we're all learning this together. From 2016 on, this is an undertaking that we all were going to have to learn along the way what works best, what doesn't need to be there. And I think as we continue to progress in that direction, and I think to some of the points you've made, Jamie, looking at the reasons certain things were in place in 2016 and looking at through the prism of 2021 and saying, we know this regulation was in place based on this concern. Is that still a concern? If it's not, then we might be able to, provide a different pathway forward.
Yeah, right. Rick, you're back. While you can talk, do you want to get some stuff in here?
I just wanted to congratulate the director. Thank him very much for coming on the program. I know I'm a little choppy right now, so I'll keep it brief. Thanks again for your participation, Director, and for everything you do for cannabis in the state of Michigan.
Sure.
That sounded good. The only other thing I really wanted to say was recently in Kalkaska we crossed paths, and that was a great kind of gathering. It was Michigan Cannabis Industry Association, again, working with the village of Kalkaska and the local businesses to create in part anyway, to create a park that's handicap accessible. And that is a place that has decided to embrace this opportunity from the beginning and has definitely looked toward, just creating a great environment for businesses to want to go there and be a part of the community and that kind of a thing. And it was just it really came together really nicely at this meeting of all the people working together up there. And, you were up there as a part of that. And there's an example of, really positive place, just taking advantage of, of the possibilities with this new industry.
And so the village supervisor asked me if I would attend, I was going to be in that area visiting some facilities anyway. It was an interesting opportunity to see. And I'm always curious how different municipalities are approaching things, what it looks like from their perspective. And to your point, Kalkaska kind of made this decision to go all in on it and provide that opportunity and establish partnerships with the businesses to focus in on collaboration to take advantage of the opportunities that existed on both sides of that issue. So that's an interesting story. And we don't advocate at the state level for municipalities to approach it one way or another. There's not a one-size-fits-all approach here, but we want to be a resource. We want to offer clarity in what we do at the state for industry participants, but also for municipal officials as well, so that we can help understand how we're approaching this in a more global perspective.
Right on. Yeah, that was a great example there of the results of embracing it. And I'm glad we all hung up there and like had that context to talk about it and check it out. Just could be a good example for other places on down the road to expand on what they're already doing or to possibly opt in when they see the benefits as opposed to some of the perceived negative consequences. Some places are holding out, waiting to see what happens in other places before they make some decisions. They can use Kalkaska as an example. That could be good for all of us. But if you have any parting words at all, just about anything concerning the agency or whatever you'd like, please.
Sorry. The only thing I would mention is that we want to be deliberate in our communication from the state level. So it's important to stay connected. You can go to our website, michigan.gov/MRA. You can sign up for our email blast. That way you can see anything that we publish. This latest advisory bulletin got a lot of media attention, but we put out, I think, information that's valuable that doesn't necessarily get picked up in the papers. So it's good to stay in tune with all of that information, and that we remain open to hearing from individuals about any concerns they have, helps inform our policy direction. And specifically to that end, we do have some draft rules that are all published now. We'll be opening the public comment period soon. So anyone who's a stakeholder in this space, whether that means you're operating in the industry or you're a consumer, it's good to look at all those changes and give us your feedback. It's a great opportunity for us to refine the program and make sure that we're accomplishing our mission as an agency.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. People do have concerns or perspectives or input or things like that. There are vehicles that are created to get public input, to be able to have some correspondence with people in the agency and things like that. And people with concerns should look out to do that.
Definitely.
Really appreciate it, man. You've been very accommodating. Sorry if we went down kind of a road on some of this stuff that wasn't exactly, smooth at times, but not a big deal. I think it all got straightened out, and just definitely really appreciate you giving us the information and the time today.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Take care. Rick.
And Frozen Rick, we'll see you later on at the show. All right. Thanks a lot. And we'll broadcast this later today. Thank you very much. Bye.
Have a good one.
All right.
Oh, that was really choppy when I was speaking. Sometimes it was pretty bad.
So I've confirmed that I'm a dick, but other than that, I'm curious what people think. And
I thought Rick sounded like Stephen Hawking, so that was kind of amusing.
Well, I like upped my intelligence perception. Okay,
Yeah,
nice. That's
You
better.
did great, Jamie.
I'll-
No one likes softball questions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
No
he
one wants to
answered
come.
all the questions we were asking,
Yeah.
previewing. He really did speak to everything we spoke about. So
But the one question I asked when I was breaking up was about numbers and how many people have actually been harmed by cannabis. And he rightly said, we don't really track that, but we do track the number of people that report adverse reactions to cannabis products from the stores. But, we don't really publish that. Yeah, that's because it's such a tiny number.
yeah, 'cause it's very,
It would support our position to see that. Just the same reason why in the most recent article by MLive where Jamie was featured, and also Berg and Roach were mentioned too. They also asked for a quote from the Department of Health about how many people have been admitted to hospitals for these particular illnesses, and they got no response to, because the response would be basically practically
Zero.
yeah.
if you have to rely on poison control call-in data to prove there's a problem, there's no problem, because what you really normally see is hospitalizations or actual visits to a doctor, not just calls to an 800 number, right?
Or deaths.
Right, exactly. So none of the metrics that are normally applied to harm are being applied in this instance. But the director's position is just fine. He's an administrator executing what the law requires him to do to the best of his ability. And if we don't like it, then we have to change the law. But some of the definitions that they've reached, we're a little curious. I mentioned to him, Rice Krispie bar, nerd rope. How do you decide which one? He said, well, some of those decisions are one-offs. That and that phrase "one-offs" means it's a subjective decision. Paul, isn't that correct, Mr. Tylenda, attorney there?
Yeah, it's it's a bad way of saying case by case basis, right? Because essentially, with the rules that they're trying to say is avoid anything that would have an appeal to either look like another consumer product or be inherently appealing to a minor, right? A lot of that goes back to what we learned through cigarettes and booze, right? The Joe Camel problems, or any of the other ways that it's advertised to where it's done in cartoon fashion or in a way that it's perceived to be appealing to minors. And now, is that subjective in itself? Sure. But I think that he touched on something that that I think is really germane to the real issue of, let's just call it the practical issue of the edibles, is you have people who are seeing the pictures and not reading the labels, right? And this is, essentially going back to the paternalistic nature of the government, which is to protect us from our own dumb asses. And that's kind of what we have here, is that, and to a large degree, I think he's correct that people are going to read the labels or see the pictures and not going to read the labels, even for something that says, hey, here's a berry flavored gummy, and they might not know. And then if they might not know, people are going to have these freak out moments where I think, isn't there like a famous YouTube video about some guy taking some edibles and then calling 911 because he was dying? And then he asked what
We
the
all
Red
know
Wings
some-
score
A
was.
Dearborn cop.
Yeah,
We all know
There you
somebody
go.
who's done that for sure. Yeah.
Right. So but that's
He
in
and
the
his wife
same
were
way.
dead.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, they were right. They were dead. But that's the same type of idiocy where it's just like we all know someone who's gotten real drunk and passed out on the lawn. I mean, it's just it's the same type of mismanagement. But I think what they're looking for is the unintentional ingestion of these products, which caveat emptor. But if you if you do have these products lying around and they're a little more, you know, they're not commercial looking, right? They're a little more benign, or they're a little more generic, right? You're going to look at it not in the same way as something that's advertised like a pack of gum or something like that. So I can see that, and I can also see that, you know, again, if they're trying to avoid an issue, which Brisbo talked about that. They're trying to avoid any problems, which I can understand. You know, the regulatory agency, their job is to regulate. And here we have a regulation. You know, like it or not, they've done their job. And in a larger sense, okay, yes. Is this a practical inconvenience for people who already have packaging printed out and already have labels on the shelf and things like that? Yes, that's an expensive temporary speed bump, right? But does this regulation really limit or impact the availability of a product? I don't think it does. Does it somehow limit the access to a product? I don't think it does. I think really what it has to do with is more of the, let's say, the safety of the product once you take it home, right? You buy it on the shelf, it doesn't matter because you are selecting it from the shelf, you are deliberately selecting it. But once you get it home and it starts to blend into another commercially available product that doesn't contain THC, and then, you know, the person that you're trying to hide it from, like your mom or your grandma, stumbles across it and is confused by the packaging, well, there might be some turmoil at home, and I can see that. But I think in reality, the regulation isn't going to, it's not going to change the market, right? Are you going to, again, aside from the temporary speed bump of the economic impact for those that already have packaging and labeling and items on the shelf, but this is part of the marijuana regulatory adventure that we are all on that is still in its infant stage. And I think there's also some, well, let's just say that there's probably some political reality to this, to say if this was an okay issue and this was what was within the powers, the acceptable powers and designated powers of the MRA to do, okay, fine. You know, is there something that we are going to get some love on another issue, right? Is this some, again, more political horse trading, or is this one of those issues to where it really kind of brings us in line to a lot of the other big legal states that also have tight packaging restrictions based on the imaging? It's all optics. It's all what do these items look like, and if they are looking more like something that's you know, appealable to minors, or, you know, available to kids, or even just has any kind of younger approach aspect to it, which is most of cannabis packaging these days, I think people are, it's cautionary, right? We don't want to face an issue that the MRA is trying to avoid and end up having to fight a battle to where now we are fighting the PR battle of somebody ate some gummies because of the packaging. And now we're thinking about, well, that's kind of a ridiculous claim, but something happened, someone got upset, there's momentum behind that, and that then becomes potentially a hot button issue, or an issue that other, let's say, detractors or not friends of cannabis can get behind to try to tighten.
It's a rallying cry for all those municipalities that want to say no to businesses, right, Paul?
Bingo.
I mean, you're talking about giving them ammo, right? Exactly
right, and that's part of it. And this is where, again, if you go back to the base of it all, where it's just like, look, I don't think if you know, other than some practical hardships, if you made any kind of packaging requirement, I don't think that's going to impede the consumer, right? It's not going to impede the availability, right? It's not going to, as long as you're not changing the safe access or the availability of these items, regulatory packaging is a hurdle.
He said a couple things, and Rick brought up, I mean, somebody's in more of a predicament if they have something like nerd ropes or something, because that product has to come off. Whereas if there's just a packaging issue, then there's like stickers and things like that can be used. So it doesn't have to actually be taken out and repackaged and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So that somebody is in a predicament if their product actually doesn't fit the.
Well, and I think that might be a sticky situation, because if you are in compliance with packaging and and labeling and the like, with opaqueness and that, then no one's going to see that item to begin with. So the only way that there would be that confusion is to either have a pre-package inspection, or to have some kind of confusion to where, which actually I think would defeat a lot of claim, but someone leaves it out and someone mistakes it for something else. Well, that's doesn't create any liability, because now it's not about the packaging or the imaging, it's about what the product looks like. And I think that that's a little far-fetched, but we're also getting into the symmetrical shapes, nothing weird, nothing nothing dynamic, no candy shapes, no pre-existing shapes, that kind of stuff, where you're getting into like the vanilla aspect of the items themselves. And if that is the issue, to where the nerd rope is not necessarily a symmetrical shape or a general geometric shape, that might be the issue over anything else, rather than whether or not it's appealable to minors or it has some kind of branding or copyright infringement.
There is a subjective nature to this entire conversation. When we talk about nerd ropes, it's pretty clear that that's a popular product in the marketplace, and it's popular because adults are purchasing it. Now, I recognize that it appeals to children, and I'm not saying that they make a decision that's like that. But really, I mentioned to him, I said, is there a list of things that you can and cannot produce? He says, well, we don't have a list, and I think it would be bad if we produced a list. But haven't we just discussed a lot of reasons why a list would actually be helpful? We said during this conversation that there are new players in the game that are repeating the mistakes of people from a couple of years ago. They're repeating those mistakes because there is no list that would tell them, hey, this is a mistake, don't do it. So it seems as if at this point, I understand why MRA might not want to take on that task as a regulatory agency, because it seems difficult. And once you start making sharp definitions, you start creating, perhaps legal problems. But I mean, the industry needs some guidelines. He did say right, that anyone that has a potential product could submit it to the MRA for pre-approval, but that seems like if they give a denial and that denial is given and it stays in private, then someone else is going to spend money on R&D for a product that's already been demonstrably not acceptable. So there just has to be a better way.
It is, and I tell you what, Rick, that really is a due diligence issue. I mean, if you're getting newcomers that are repeating the mistakes of the old folk, then I look at that as, maybe you haven't done the market research. And would it be helpful if the state said, yeah, this is allowed and this isn't? Certainly, but having the opportunity to submit a plan in advance to say, will this fly? And then returning it saying yes and no, essentially based on the particulars of that item rather than some generalities or some universalities of items themselves. That really is part of the due diligence process. And I look at, if we're talking about car parts versus cannabis, right? Car makers aren't going to repeat the errors of parts that had come before them that didn't fly. They're going to have done all of their research and this is part of the investment, as these guys who have come to the market and have done, haven't done their homework and bring a product that is non-compliant because it was previously non-compliant.
That's what he said. Yeah.
That's a huge waste of money. And if I were an investor or somebody involved in that process, I'd be looking at the wherewithal of the people I'm doing business with and being just like, the answers are out there. Someone didn't do the homework or didn't take the time to run this past, especially if there's an avenue to where you can be like, hey, let's submit this to see if it's going to be approved by the state. It'll take 2 weeks. It'll save us several thousands of dollars and several hours worth of problems if we just take that time to do so. Like I view that as a business error, because it's not like the state is saying you're on your own. They're just saying the parameters on this are so loose as to not interfere with the creative process, but we aren't going to necessarily tell you what's inside. We're just going to be there to tell you what's outside. And
I will tell you that. Go ahead, please.
Go ahead. I was going to say that there's a problem with regulation, right? Regulation is, here's some rules. Do they have to make sense? Yes or no? And they only have to make sense to certain people for certain things.
Yeah. Well, Rob Robar from the Helping Friendly Salve Company posted a comment that Jamie shared just a moment ago about having to have this package submitted prior to approval. There are circumstances where you might want to have designs submitted ahead of time. However, I think it would just flood the MRA if you tried to make that mandatory. Because imagine all of the different, we have hundreds of dispensaries nowadays. We have grow operations that are massive that have many different product lines. If each one of them had to submit that package to the MRA, it would certainly slow down the process and take a much longer path to profitability for some of these business investors. And as Paul pointed out rightly beforehand, none of these things really seem to affect the industry itself as far as sales of product or which products are being sold. These regulations really don't negatively affect the consumer. It's really a business issue.
Yeah, and that's something too, is that if I don't look at all packaging as a problem, because all packaging isn't necessarily appealing to minors or to create, let's just say, brand confusion, right? So, with some simple rules, it's, well, let's avoid images of fruit. Let's avoid things that are cartoonish. Let's avoid things that are, kind of too juvenile looking. But for a lot of brands, that type of colorful, bubbly language and imaging is very much a part of their branding identity, that they can't just go into angular, sleek line, straight line, minimalist type of branding, because that's not who they're selling to. And
you can't take away the whole pastel palette. It'd be difficult to do.
Bingo. But therein lies the problem, because I think there are a ton of brands that don't have to worry about their imaging because it's very minimalist, or it's very streamlined, or it's very specific and to the point, to where I think now we're getting into the ones that are more artistic, or the ones that actually contain more imaging or images are going to be problematic, especially if you have again a graffiti drawn individual. Well, that's going to look like a cartoon. And is that cartoon now going to be confused that you're going to be appealing to minors? Well, you get some curmudgeon at the MRA and they're going to say yes, right? And then you're going to have someone push back and say, well, that's my artistic expression, that's the brand identity, and here are all these individual marketing aspects and artistic aspects of what they're talking about, and people are going to have a lot of hurt feelings over that. And there's going to be some contest over that.
A lot of the stuff was already known, though, Paul. I mean, we know that in the regulation it said packaging not appealing to minors. So I can appreciate where there's some gray area where, for example, the MKX logo is a very nicely done horse that has these flowing mane behind him, and it looks very much like a business card type of a really good logo trademark. But they labeled that as appealing to minors, and it's not cartoonish, although it is gold and sparkly. So maybe that has something to do with it. But the fact is, the definitions, the subjective aspect of this is what really throws some people off. But everybody knew you can't have pictures of strawberries. You cannot have a cartoon horse. You cannot have there are certain things you just can't do, and that was well known. So,
and I think it's not a mystery. It's not like any of this is like, oh, hey, brand new, and it also kind of touches on the idea again that we're not the only ones doing this. We're the state, where Michigan isn't making this up on their own. Other states do this. Other states regulate this. And I also kind of go back to, it sound like what Brisbo was saying when it talks about the case by case analysis is this sort of like what the U.S. Supreme Court had said about pornography, right? You know when you see it.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
And that therein lies the problem, because then you have the MKX issue where it's like, yeah, it's a drawn horse of some kind, and while that is their logo, that imaging on their packaging is problematic. And how would you know that without submitting it or without running it past the MRA? on that case, I don't know that you would, right? But like Rick said, it's known that you couldn't have imaging and cartoons and fruit and things like that. So again, someone isn't doing their homework.
Yep. Yeah, I was thinking about that. I know it when I see it type thing. And there are a couple like weird lines that are being drawn and, in this discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So, but again, I think I said during the interview, like it's all part of getting used to cannabis, understanding it, figuring out what we really need to be that concerned with and what we don't. And
Mm-hmm.
we have things that are a lot more dangerous that we don't go out of our way to do all this crap over. That's readily available. I think it's kind of emotional to a degree too, like these assumptions, kind of similar to the pregnancy warning, which isn't just like something that's similar to like a bottle of aspirin or something. It's this big, long, shameful, fucking bullshit thing. And what I don't like about it is that somebody who's been using cannabis might not want to take it after that. Who's been benefiting from it. I'm sorry, go ahead, Rick.
Cannabis's beneficial status is just so counterintuitive to many people because they equate it to alcohol and they equate it to tobacco. So they feel like it's got to be bad for us. So we have to protect the people that are vulnerable because cannabis has got to be bad for us. But as Jamie pointed out sort of indirectly today, show me the numbers, man. There's no hospitalizations. There's no deaths. There's no significant issue with it. If you trust the MCMA and the Anderson Economic Group's recent study, millions and millions of Michiganders are using cannabis every single year. Where's the proof of any danger? That's not to say that the Marijuana Regulatory Agency doesn't have a responsibility to do what they're doing. But really, are there not bigger fish to fry?
Well, and that's the correspondence, right? Is what you're talking about, Rick, is that put out the burning fires, right? Address the danger close issues. And if this isn't really an issue, okay, well, let's avoid the issue. And kind of glad that it's not an issue because really it's just tightening up the labels to avoid any, I always look at one of these things as like, don't give anybody any excuse, don't give anybody any reason. And if someone, again, not someone who's familiar or understands cannabis or has, an IQ above a bullfrog, but you can see the argument that someone's going to try to get a lot of traction with I ate this cannabis because it looked like strawberries, or I ate this gummy because it
and now
said it
you
was
have
sour.
to pay me for that. You have to pay me because of my.
Yeah, and if you think about, what I call the McDonald's lawsuits, right? Like the lady who sued when she spilled the hot coffee on herself, and that was McDonald's fault. And the guy who slips and falls when he's robbing the McDonald's and he sues the McDonald's and wins because that's McDonald's fault. And all of these ridiculous things that you read about and that sound like comedy are just smart ass attorneys and people capitalizing on problems that are either there or hadn't been addressed. And if you can avoid that kind of bullshit from those kind of people, I would love to, if this is the trade-off to where I avoid the stupidity and the dumb arguments in the future of I was confused because I didn't read the label. Well, how about if I just start handing out rat poison and you start eating that because you're not reading the label either? Is that what you're going to tell me? That I can hand you anything, you could pick up any package and be confused by it? Like those are the kind of, that's the kind of argument that people who live, amongst us try to make. And in reality, they're making arguments that people.
Let me just say this: that if the only thing we have to complain about right now from the MRA is the difference between Rice Krispie treats and Nerd Ropes, Deb Young, what do you think? I think we're in a much better situation than we've been for a very long time. They're pretty much on a pathway that's leading us forward.
Yeah, but some of the stuff is pretty ridiculous. I said earlier, I really think that it's a parent's obligation to make sure their kid's not ingesting anything in their house. Lock it up like you would, or not even lock it up, but you put it out of reach like you would alcohol, cigarettes. But then again, I can see both sides of this. I remember when we were kids and we used to have the candy cigarettes, and I've heard people say, "Well, that never hurt anybody," but our whole generation smoked cigarettes. So yeah, we're not advocating. I don't want to see kids getting a hold of edibles and stuff, but I'm sure that if it happens, it's very infrequent and nobody's really seriously injured. I mean, it's a fine line, but I hate to see them over-regulated to the point of it's just your edible is just a massive, I don't know what the hell it is that you're eating. You want to get a little enjoyment out of something that you put in your mouth and ingest, a little flavor, a little.
Brisbo said essentially all their legislative goals have been accomplished. They wanted the Delta 8 taken into the MRA's fold. And, that basically said we're not pursuing any other legislative goals at this time. And that was encouraging to hear that they're not trying to
and then the other
any
part
other
is,
yeah,
we try to talk to these MCMA members and other big investors and say, instead of looking to suppress another area of activity, let's try to work with the department stuff to try to ease up some existing restrictions or something to make things more efficient and.
Yeah, I mean, he seems pretty upfront, but I mean, I've learned through past experiences with government officials and people working with government agencies that, it's not always the truth that we hear. And so I always enter into this with a little bit of skepticism.
I agree. Paul, let me ask you a question. The new marijuana and tobacco state police SWAT team, I'm sorry, I don't know the name of the regulatory group, have been making some raids across the state. Hasn't really made the papers a lot, but they've been busting some people. Have you had any cases come across your desk as a criminal defense attorney?
Oh yeah, a handful. And a lot of what they're doing, I saw a little bit of this ultimately since MRTMA passed, even in places before they opted in. But they took all the tobacco people and really just went in there and started treating cases as if these people were selling unstamped cigarettes, right? States coming in there saying, look, you are selling this and we're not getting our cut, so we're taking it. And the penalty against you is usually this tax issue that you have to pay for, the sales tax and the regulatory tax and all the issues that you sold. Really, it's just a money game. But what I've seen in this situation is sometimes it's the classic, smash and grab where they raid the establishment, take all the cash, take all the cannabis, leave some paperwork, and then no one gets arrested, no one hears a thing. And then when you make a phone call, people essentially suggest, maybe you should just forget about this and go away. So I've seen a few of those. I recently have seen nuisance actions, which is the classic way of doing it, which is saying, hey, this building and this use is a nuisance, so we're going to try to padlock it for a year. And even with the
that's what they did to us in Chesterfield Township with Big Daddy's.
Same idea. And a lot of these places, they're going after the traditional, let's call it gift shops, or just the underground traditional marketplaces. Cops are going in there doing controlled buys, using those pictures and that evidence as the basis of the nuisance lawsuit and going forward. So again, there aren't any arrests, and I've actually had recently in Detroit, I've had clients had the SWAT team show up, go in there, just take the cannabis and leave. And they're not necessarily searching anything. They're just taking what's in plain view, and they're following up on a tip, and they're kind of pursuing. They're following up on the addresses that have lawsuits filed against them. Wow. So they're doing it, and they're essentially doing it under the guise of this is a state-regulated activity that you have to have a license for, and doing so without a license is not allowed. It's a nuisance.
Paul, explain addresses that have their. Explain about addresses that have lawsuits against them.
So when you have a nuisance claim, they file it against the building and the building owner, and they enact an order that allows the court to discontinue the use, essentially padlock the door for 1 year, for a 1 year period. And they make the property owner a party to the lawsuit. So a lot of times what you'll have is you'll have like a tenant who runs a operation. They'll get shut down. They'll have their own forfeiture issues or own lawsuit issues or nuisance being named as the nuisance. And then they'll bring in the property owner because the property is at issue and it affects their rights. I've been in situations in the past, even in the last year, where there have been, unpermitted or unlicensed grows or just, places that have been upsetting the neighbors that they went for nuisance actions and tried to padlock the door and things like that. And mostly they'll try to work it out with the property owner with the promise and understanding that the property isn't continued for that use.
So I'm about ready to say, before you get to the point where it's locked, aren't there a couple of times where there's like, hey, this activity's going on, so you have to, cut that shit out, or else you're going to end up with the
There's
place locked down.
There's a huge due process element to all this, and the lockout is the result of a hearing and all these things. But the argument that, especially in cities like Detroit, the argument that you get a lot of traction on is what good does a building being padlocked for 1 year do to the community, right? How about we just figure out a better way to do this and we make an agreement that says let's put it to better use? Because if that building can be used for anything else, whatever it may be, that serves the community better, and the occupant can go somewhere else. I'll just say that.
So, Paul, let me just say this. It seems like what you're saying is that the city has a nuisance lawsuit against a particular building. They know there's cannabis plants in there, so even though the nuisance lawsuit is still in court, they then raid that particular property, zap all of the cannabis plants out of it, and then leave. So now you have a nuisance lawsuit and no real basis to continue the cannabis activity because all your plants are gone.
Well, and that's the interesting part about it is you're right that they have terminated the problem on their own. And that is going to be the interesting aspect, but they're certainly going to proceed on the past grievances, right? They're going to say, well, we came in and we fixed it, but for the last 6 months or however long, you've been operating this nuisance and we're still proceeding with it, even though
but what about
the remedy
what
is
about
there.
the bullshit about raiding a place that's still under a nuisance lawsuit? I mean, shouldn't they be hands off to that place until the nuisance lawsuit plays out, right?
It's it's trying to eliminate the nuisance, and what they have the right to do is to write you a ticket for every day of the continuing offense. And the other side of that is they'll come in there and try to abate the offense, right? Whatever the public health offense is, and that's where, which is it's funny and interesting because it's very particular, right? I got clients calling me and there's like, they come to my building and like, what are they doing? And I was like, they're taking my weed jars. I'm like, what else are they doing? They're just like, nothing. They just came in, took the weed jars and left. I'm like, well, that's in their mind, that's the fire, right? That's the urgency. That's the issue. They're not there for anything else. They're not there to do anything. But in their mind, if they show up and they believe that those jars of cannabis on a display case are in violation of, the public health code, then they can abate that nuisance. And that's what they're, and the cops are nowhere near as cordial as I am about the explanation. They'll go in there and take the cannabis nicely and talk trash to you the whole way out. It's very old fashioned, very, very much what we're familiar with in the old school cannabis world. But it's just a way, just like they used to do. And we've all kind of been there where it's just like, look, we can't arrest you. So we're just gonna make it really hard for you to do business. So we're going to try to convince you in the limited amount of ways that we have to try to get you to go elsewhere. And that's the unique part about situations. Let's say the unique situation is that this has to do with buildings, right? So that the nuisance is the address, right? And
well, there's a couple ways a nuisance could take place. One is illegal activity inside of it, and the other is actually creating a disturbance around it with too many cars trying to go in there at once or making too much noise or or something like that.
Right. And their suits will always say that because the activity requires a license, the unlicensed activity of it is in violation of the public health code, which it is. violations of the public health code are a nuisance, and that's how they proceed. Which, I mean, it's stemming from McQueen, it's the one real tool they have left in the toolbox to do anything about property regulation.
So there was just recently I forgot where it was, but apparently 1,200 plants in one place outside of the commercial system, and there were no arrests. Kind of what you were describing.
Yeah.
I was happy about that. Part of it.
We've been calling for civil resolution to these things for a long time, Jamie, and it seems like they are taking a civil path, but the whole ripping off of the plants seems so very 2012.
Yeah, cut that shit out. Don't have all those plants I don't know.
It's and that's part of it. And I think part of the practical reality is that there's no one has tolerance for paperwork on cannabis cases. So it's not like anybody's going to do an arrest and take somebody in and everybody at the station is going to support them. They're going to be like, why are you bringing this guy in? Just write a ticket and let him go. Get out of here. But that is, again, it's something that we've always asked for, is to say, look, if I'm out of compliance, just tell me, I'll fix it. Just let me know. That's all you got to do. Mm-hmm. And that was, to the MRA's credit, for the first couple of years, let's just say for the first year of MMFLA and the first years of the MRTMA, it was, educate, not punish. And because we were all kind of learning this together, we're all kind of, building the plane while it's in the air, that these violations, these regulatory violations, weren't necessarily egregious or gross violations. I mean, some of them were, but for the most part, these are all learning curve stuff. So the
Paul,
type of yeah.
Let's talk about these violations again, because the Marijuana Regulatory Agency posts lists of licensees who create violations in policy. And the legitimacy of slapping a $5,000 penalty on a company that has 15,000 cannabis plants under cultivation seems, more like swatting a mosquito than actually negatively influencing future behavior. I advocate for a little bit more stiffer penalty in order to make the point and to avoid repeat behavior. What do you think about that?
I think the current system is consistent with the way they enforce liquor licenses, where it's just like, pay $400 or shut for 4 days. I'm like, well, okay, I'll pay the $400. So these are these are strikes against the pride, and enough of these small cuts are going to create problems for you down the road. It's odd that, yes, okay, any regulatory violation should scare the hell out of you, and yes, should it come at a higher penalty? Yes, and I think that we're starting to see that. I don't know. For as much as I don't believe it, because I think economic penalties are not penalties to those who can afford it, right? So error committed by, a 10 Class C holder, same error committed by a Class A holder, and the penalty is the same. One is a drop in the bucket. The other is, affects the bottom line. We're starting to see more of what I would call serious penalties with the annual financial statements, where they're, if you miss the deadline and don't do it and you somehow drop the ball, it's a big slap on the wrist, it's a slap in the face. And these things start to mount, right? So that the fact that, hey, I'm here and I've never had a violation before is still a good argument, right? The other side of that is, again, going back to what we know through liquor licensing, is you get the same guy with a violation 3 times a year, they're going to be like, Mr. Jones, are you really good at this? We keep seeing you a lot. We know you by name at this point. You're taking some penalties, you're taking some lumps. We're starting to question your ability to run this company. Those are the hurdles down the road, right? And state regulatory is going to say, the idea is to let people learn from their mistakes and move on, right? Too many mistakes, too large of mistakes. I think it's problematic, but I mean, I agree. I think there should be something with teeth, right? So that there's the fear of compliance, right? It's, if you step over the line, you don't get slapped for it, you're going to continue to do it. It's going to be looser. I believe it was Illinois had a program where in their licenses, they posted a bond. and the bond was then billed for any penalty, and that you couldn't, the license wasn't valid until the bond was then fulfilled again. So that they took your money, you posted the bond, they took your money, and you had to fill it back up. But those are economic penalties that are different for larger corporations. I mean, we know this from environmental, is that there are companies that factor in violations into their cost of doing business. So they say, okay, well, we're about to get tagged for $500,000 in environmental violations, but we made $3 million in doing so. We came out ahead. So we'll pay those tickets. We'll pay those fines. So if there's the incentive to not have the consequences mean anything in terms of down the road, or in terms of the cleanliness of the operation, or the health of the operation, or the quality of the product, then yeah, you're going to have larger companies who factor in the cost of those errors as business, and again, not fair to the small guy and not fair to the consumer.
Yep, I agree. Especially since the penalties assessed to cannabis patients registered through the Medical Marijuana Act can be so severe. A slight violation of your 2008 rules can make you not a patient any longer. It can make you just a drug dealer, or just a guy growing your plants in your basement. Any technical violation, they certainly in Oakland County were doing that to you. It seems like, again, just like we talked about with alcohol and cannabis, there's a different standard applied to the cannabis industry than there is to everything else.
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, we'll kind of start winding down on this and get to John just for a few minutes and have some final thoughts and stuff like that. But you know, in the position that we're in right now, under the circumstances that the director is in, and all that, it makes sense to do something, I guess, similar to what they're doing. Yes, we have some questions about where the lines are in some cases. But I thought it was still an opportunity to try to put into perspective, some of the reality about cannabis and downplay the inference that it's like a really dangerous thing in the event that this does actually take place. Opportunities like that, I think, I don't know how successful it is. It's a difficult thing. People assume a lot of stuff, internalize a lot of things about cannabis that we don't necessarily have good reasons to believe, but it's so prevalent that it's it's a thing to consider.
And that gets
that's where I
into
was with that.
that you're touching on the ounce of prevention being worth a pound of cure, and that is the avoid the problem before it's a problem,
Right.
And you get there, especially for such a non-issue, right? It's like if like I said, if you had to trade, if this is the trade-off for avoiding any of that stupid argument down the road, I'm okay with it.
Well, and again, we talked about a couple times, it really doesn't affect consumerism at all. So I'm sorry for those companies that produce nerd ropes and other things that are going to be found illegal, because they're probably going to lose some money on that. But we will be stronger as an industry going forward, and certainly their lesson will be learned by newcomers, even if there isn't a list in Lansing that people can learn from. This will be so public that.
Right.
Yeah.
And the examples are there.
John Schlicker with
Look at
Cannapalooza. John, look at you with the awesome outdoor background, man.
Lake view, man. Look at that.
Yeah.
That's his porch, huh?
There he is.
Yes, I'm back there.
Silhouette and a lake in the back.
That's great.
Yeah,
Jamie is
I'm
best viewed as a silhouette also, by the way.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
I can't see it, but I got my back to the beautiful lake here I live at. Cannapalooza Worldwide Headquarters. Look forward to seeing everybody August 20th to the 22nd. Campers that want to come and camp for the weekend, $25, and they can come in Thursday evening. I encourage campers to show up early, preferably Thursday evening and early Friday morning. As the gate will open for the event Friday at noon. So be there with your camp set up.
So
I'd
John,
like
it sounds like a lot of fun. It sounds like you moved, a similar platform from a little couple hours further north, and down to some area around Standish area.
Yes, we're in Bentley. We're at 8222 North Carter Road, Bentley, Michigan. Take I-75 to exit 190 and go west on M61
Okay.
out to Carter Road. It's probably about 8 or 9 miles out there.
And so, John, we had Attorney Sean Gallagher on last week, and just kind of went over a little bit as far as he could discuss some kind of status update over
right.
some discussion of some people taking issue or there being some questions about the event or something like that by some of the locals. Is that still being resolved, or do you feel good about its potential resolution, or what's status on that, as much as you can talk about it?
Well, yeah, there was a couple people in the township that were opposed to this kind of. They're opposed to cannabis. They're what I call the haters. Been happened to be a supervisor on the township board, and her with the zoning administrator for the county there, also a hater, wanted to try to put up a roadblock and tell me that I had to apply for this special use ordinance. So I said, okay, well, let me see the ordinance. Of course, they couldn't find one to show me because I didn't have one. And so they tried to create one through a special meeting. And, well, I say they, but the supervisor did. And at their special meeting, she couldn't even get the support of her own board, so she up and quit.
Oh. I didn't realize all this stuff was going down over this.
So more of a status update, John. Should supervisor quit? What happened next?
I think he might have frozen at that point. But that's further info that I was aware of, things resulting from that whole process.
Sounds like there might have been an Open Meetings Act violation there. Certainly, you can't have council business like that discussed in private and have things like forms created without any kind of a public forum. So
it also kind of sounds like the effort to stop this was thwarted.
Yeah,
according to
I
this.
think
I'd
so.
like to confirm that with John. So
I'd love it if Cannapalooza was a go.
Cannapalooza Worldwide. There's a Facebook page, Red Setter Farm, that you can check out on Facebook, I'm sure. Maybe we'll get John back on here in a minute. He will kind of clarify some of that stuff. But
yeah. Hey, listen,
anyway,
I'd
I
like
hope
to
it's
say,
going on. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, wanted to thank Paul for coming on. I know that we're running close to our 6 o'clock hour. Paul, can you let any of our viewers know how to get a hold of you if they want to seek your legal services or just
Absolutely.
get some 8x10 color glossies?
I think I have some, but just for you, Rick. You can call me. You can call me at my office, 313-731-6160. You can email me, paul@tylendalaw.com, TYLENDALAW.com. Call me, email me, carrier pigeon, smoke signals. You want to tell me a joke or settle a bet, whatever you need, I'm here.
That's a full service law firm right there.
And I mentioned it before, but I know that you've been jumping in and working with us a lot now at the Great Lakes Expungement Network. And,
Oh, it's a good time.
Yeah, and much appreciated, because obviously as we're trying to build that, get that going, there's there's some difficulties and some complexities and costs and things like that, and trying to get people exonerated from, or not exonerated, but expunged from some of their cannabis stuff. And it's harder than people think, especially after that package of bills that went through.
It'll all be worth it. It's one of those, it's a time issue, and it's, in a matter of perspective, Michigan is one of the best states right now in terms of the programs we have to clean records up. I've dealt with a couple issues where people have called me from different states, or they have convictions from different states, and some of the states, even some of our neighboring states, don't offer programs at all. So like, you screw up once, forget it. And that's, it's unfair, because I'm getting people who are calling me like, hey, in 1993, this happened. And I'm like, well, that's a lifetime ago, and now it still follows you around, and it still bothers you. And it came up enough to where in 2021, you're calling me to see if you can get rid of it. So, I mean, it's a great program. It's a great thing. It's worth getting as many people involved as you can. Do it. Any questions, get it, clear your record.
Right on, and your assistance with that, and it's much appreciated. We have a bunch of really good lawyers actually kind of working with our organization. You've come on recently and have really helped out a lot. So thank you. And
glad to help.
Anything else you wanna make sure that we get in before we decide to start wrapping this up?
I love you guys. You always have. You guys have always been doing exactly what you're doing right now, and you have been the guiding light. You've been the torch on the front of the train for the cannabis community, and it's really been it's been an honor and a pleasure. It's really been a lot of fun. I don't think I've ever not had fun when you guys are around, no matter what. So that's hard to do.
Yeah, there wasn't enough of that kind of acknowledgement. That's why I needed to give you a couple more minutes.
Right.
There. Thanks, I appreciate that.
We're old guys at this point. We're old vets.
That's right. Yeah, Paul, your accomplishments speak for themselves. You've been around for a long time and helped a lot of innocent people avoid jail time, and involved in some of the most storied cases in Michigan's medical marijuana era. And thanks for all the work you've done over the years.
Helped us get some good information on here a lot of times too, including today.
It's always my pleasure.
I have one more. Please, Paul, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I have one more attorney I wanted to call out to. Jason Szymanski is a prisoner in Michigan system and for cannabis, for using cannabis while on parole. He'll be released August 11th. Michigan Cannabis Freedom Coalition and many other people helped along with Last Prisoner Project, Clean Smoke Initiative, the Cannabis Caucus. Congratulations, everyone. But when he gets out, Jason loves bicycling. He likes to travel by bike instead of car. And I put out an appeal on Facebook the other day, and attorney Bruce Leach volunteered to purchase a bike for Mr. Szymanski when he gets out. So that's
nice work.
Look at big old Bruce. He's got a big heart, that guy does. And he's a triathlete. He's been a mountain biker for his entire life. So he knows bicycles and he knows the importance of one. So kudos and thank you to all the people helping Jason get out, and the people that are helping him once he gets out. So thanks.
Outstanding. Good stuff. Great stuff.
Yep. Our community is.
I think that was another good show. We lost Deb. She usually cuts out before the end. And that is no different today. But we had great people on. John Schlicker, he somehow lost his connection, but I think all pertinent information came in there, plus the Cannapalooza Worldwide.com site. Andrew McFarlane posted in the comments.
He did.
Check it out more there. Paul, again, thank you very much. I appreciate Director Brisbo and Rick for arranging that interview that we were able to pre-record earlier today. I think we got a lot of good info out again, and we'll be back again next week. Rick, you want to leave us with anything?
Well, what we have to do in the cannabis industry as consumers is keep an eye on who's doing what, because although the information about violations of regulations is out there, it's not publicly known. Some of the cannabis industry people are great actors. Some of them are less so. But it's important to give recognition to the people that are trying hard to make sure our industry stays as safe as it possibly can and as free from criticism as it can be. And we saw an example today of somebody who's put in a tough position and has to make regulations. Whether you love them or you hate them, good job, Director Brisbo, for for leading the marijuana regulatory agency, and for everybody else here for asking the tough questions that help guide their actions in a positive way to make sure they're benefiting all of us. It's this feedback that helps them make good decisions, and we have to continue to do that. So thanks for everyone that participated today in the chat and is watching.
And Ryan Basor's on to say goodbye with us toward the end of the show here. So thanks, everybody. Jazz Cabbage Cafe.
Nice.
Another good show. We'll be back
Thanks,
next
guys.
week. See you guys.
Thanks, everybody.